Lieutenant Jason Carter had faced many challenges in his career as a diplomat for the United Terran Federation, but nothing had prepared him for this. The Grand Hall of the Velari Dominion's royal palace was filled with towering alien nobles, their golden armor shining under the crystal chandeliers. At the head of the long banquet table sat Emperor Valer, his piercing silver eyes watching everything like a hawk. Beside him was his daughter, Princess Taela, a striking figure with violet skin, dark silver hair, and eyes that glowed like twin moons. She was a legend among her people, fierce, intelligent, and completely out of Jason's league. Jason had been sent here to negotiate an alliance between humanity and the Velari, a powerful warrior empire that still viewed humans as an untested species. He had prepared for difficult debates, maybe even a show of military strength, but not for what happened next. As the servants poured glowing blue wine into crystal goblets, the Emperor rose and raised his cup. The hall fell silent. Jason straightened in his seat, ready to deliver his speech. But before he could speak, the Emperor turned to his daughter. "Princess Taela," the Emperor said, his voice like rolling thunder. "It is time." Jason frowned. Time for what? Taela stood and faced him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of hesitation, maybe frustration. Then she spoke. "My family has decided that we must be married, human." The room was so silent Jason could hear his own heartbeat. His mind completely shut down for a few seconds. Wait, what? His brain scrambled for an explanation. Maybe he had misheard. Maybe married meant something different in the Velari language. Maybe this was some kind of joke. But the serious expressions on the alien nobles' faces told him otherwise. What? Jason finally managed to say. Taela sighed, as if she had expected this reaction. "My people value bonds of blood and honor above all else. A mere agreement is not enough. A political alliance between our species must be sealed with marriage." Jason blinked. "You mean our marriage?" "Yes." Jason coughed. "Yeah. I don't think that's gonna work. I mean, no offense, Your Highness, but we just met." The Emperor frowned. The nobles murmured. Jason could feel the tension in the air thickening. His instincts screamed at him that rejecting this offer outright might be seen as an insult. Before he could figure out a way to escape this nightmare, his earpiece crackled to life. His superior officer's voice came through, calm and firm. "Lieutenant Carter, this is an excellent opportunity. Handle it diplomatically." Jason stared at his wine goblet, wishing he could drown himself in it. This mission was going to be a disaster. Jason Carter sat frozen in his chair, his mind refusing to accept what had just happened. Married to an alien princess. This had to be some kind of mistake. He glanced at Princess Taela, hoping she would say it was a joke. But her expression remained serious. The Velari nobles were watching him closely, their glowing eyes full of expectation. Jason cleared his throat. Look, I respect your traditions, really. But don't you think marriage is a little extreme?" Taela crossed her arms, her gaze sharp. "It is how my people ensure loyalty. We do not trust words alone. A blood bond is the strongest proof of unity." Jason groaned internally. He had read about Velari culture before coming here. They were warriors, known for their strict honor code. To them, alliances weren't just signed on paper, they were sealed with family ties. But this was insane. "Surely there's another way." Jason tried again, forcing a diplomatic smile. "Maybe a treaty, a trade agreement." Emperor Valer's expression darkened. "Are human bonds so weak that you fear commitment?" Jason nearly choked on his drink. No, it's not that." Taela sighed, rubbing her temples. She looked just as frustrated as he was. "I understand that this is unexpected, human, but I did not ask for this either. My father and the High Council believe this is necessary." Jason studied her face. There was no excitement in her voice. No happiness. She was just as trapped in this situation as he was. That made him feel slightly better, but only slightly. He took a deep breath. All right, let's say, for argument's sake, that I agreed. What happens then? Sayala's eyes flickered with surprise, as if she hadn't expected him to consider it. Then you will be welcomed into the royal family as my consort. You will live here among my people, and your federation and my dominion will be bound as one. Jason gulped. And if I refuse? The room grew silent. The nobles exchanged glances. The emperor's fingers tapped against his goblet. Sayala answered carefully. It would be unfortunate. Many would see it as an insult. It could weaken trust between our species. Some may even see it as an act of rejection, leading to conflict. Jason shut his eyes for a moment. Great. So if I say no, I might start a war. If I say yes, I'm stuck in an alien marriage. His earpiece crackled again. His superior's voice was firm. Carter, do whatever it takes to maintain diplomacy. Jason muttered under his breath. Yeah, easy for you to say. When he opened his eyes, he found Sayala watching him. There was something in her gaze, curiosity, maybe even respect. Well, human, she asked, what will you do? Jason exhaled sharply. He had no idea. But one thing was clear. This mission was getting worse by the second. Jason Carter had survived political negotiations, alien encounters, and even a near-death experience during his time as a diplomat. But nothing had prepared him for this. Standing in the center of a massive training arena, surrounded by towering Velarre warriors, he faced Princess Sayala, who held a sleek, curved blade in her hand. Her silver eyes were focused, her stance firm. Jason, on the other hand, held a wooden training sword and looked like a man who had made a terrible life decision. This is insane, he muttered. Sayala smirked. This is tradition. After the shocking announcement of their forced engagement, Jason had tried to argue his way out of it. He had pleaded, reasoned, and even tried to negotiate with Emperor Valar. But the Velarre had their customs, and one of them was this. If a royal marriage was arranged, the chosen consort had to prove themselves in battle. Jason had pointed out that he wasn't a warrior. The emperor had simply replied, "Then you will fail, and we will know you are unworthy." So now, Jason stood in the arena, with no choice but to fight the woman he was supposed to marry. The signal was given. The match began. Sayala moved first. She lunged, her blade cutting through the air with deadly precision. Jason barely had time to dodge. He stumbled back, holding up his wooden sword in a weak attempt to defend himself. Sayala stopped, raising an eyebrow. "Are you even trying?" Jason scowled. "I am trying. You're just terrifyingly good at this." She sighed and lowered her blade slightly. "If you cannot fight, why did your people send you?" Jason took a deep breath. "Because humans don't just fight with weapons. We fight with strategy, with negotiation. We win battles by outthinking our enemies." Sayala studied him for a moment, then suddenly attacked again. This time, Jason didn't retreat. Instead, he dodged at the last second and swung his wooden sword, not at her, but at the sand beneath her feet, kicking up a cloud of dust. Sayala hesitated for a fraction of a second. That was all Jason needed. He stepped forward and pressed his sword lightly against her side. The arena fell silent. Sayala glanced down at the wooden blade touching her waist. Then, to Jason's surprise, she laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh. And it wasn't mocking. It was genuine. "You fight like a human," she said, shaking her head. "Clever. Unexpected." Jason lowered his sword. "Is that a compliment?" Sayala smiled slightly. "It is recognition." The emperor stood and nodded approvingly. "He may not be a warrior, but he is not weak." Jason sighed in relief. He had survived the challenge. But as he looked at Sayala, he realized something else. This engagement was far from over. Jason Carter had barely recovered from his trial by combat, when he was thrown into another battlefield, Vaylari politics. The royal court was a grand chamber filled with towering alien nobles, their expressions unreadable. Jason sat beside Princess Ciala, feeling completely out of place. The challenge had earned him some respect, but many still saw him as a weak outsider. The emperor sat on his golden throne, his sharp gaze sweeping over the gathered nobles. The alliance with the Terran Federation will bring strength to both our peoples, he declared. But there are those who would rather see us divided. Jason didn't miss the way some nobles stiffened at those words. Ciala leaned closer to him. "Be careful," she whispered. "Not everyone supports this union." Jason frowned. "You don't say." The meeting continued, filled with discussions of trade, military cooperation, and, unfortunately, wedding preparations. Jason could barely focus. He had bigger concerns. Someone in this room didn't want peace. An assassin strikes. Later that night, Jason walked through the palace gardens, trying to clear his head. The air was cool, the twin moons casting a silver glow over the alien flowers. Then he heard it, a faint whisper of movement. Years of training kicked in. Jason ducked just as a sharp blade slashed through the air where his neck had been. Instinctively, he rolled forward and spun around. A dark figure stood in the shadows, their face hidden behind a Vaylari war mask. The assassin lunged again. Jason barely dodged, but he wasn't a fighter. He wouldn't last long. A sudden roar of anger filled the air. Ciala. She moved like lightning, her sword flashing. The assassin barely had time to react before she disarmed them in 2 swift strikes. The masked figure stumbled, then threw a small explosive at the ground. A blast of smoke filled the garden. When it cleared, the assassin was gone. Ciala cursed in her native tongue before turning to Jason. "Are you hurt?" Jason shook his head. "I'm fine, but I think it's safe to say not everyone is happy about this engagement." Ciala's expression hardened. This was a warning. Jason looked around, his mind racing. If someone was willing to kill to stop this alliance, then this was bigger than just a forced marriage. It was a war waiting to happen, and he was caught right in the middle of it. Jason Carter sat in the royal palace's war room, still shaken from the assassination attempt. Across from him, Princess Ciala stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The tension in the room was thick. The assassin was skilled. Ciala said, "This wasn't a common mercenary. It was someone trained in the ways of the Vaylari." Jason frowned. "You mean one of your own people?" Ciala's jaw tightened. "Yes, that means someone in the court is working against us." Jason exhaled sharply. He had expected some resistance to the alliance, but not this level of hostility. Whoever had sent that assassin wasn't just protesting the marriage. They wanted him dead. The emperor entered, flanked by 2 royal guards. His silver eyes locked onto Jason. "You survived," he said, his voice deep and commanding. "Barely," Jason muttered. The emperor studied him for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "Good. It means you are not completely useless." Jason wasn't sure whether to be flattered or insulted. Ciala turned to her father. The assassin was Vaylari trained. This was an inside job. The emperor's expression darkened. He looked at one of his advisors, an older noble named Lord Verok. "Summon the High Council. We must find the traitor." Lord Verok bowed and left the room. Jason ran a hand through his hair. "Okay, let's say we find out who's behind this. What then?" The emperor's voice was cold. "Then they will die." Jason sighed. "Of course. Vaylari justice. No trials, no diplomacy. Just execution." Ciala glanced at him. "You disapprove." Jason hesitated. "Look, I get it. This is your way. But if we start killing people without proof, we might make things worse." The emperor chuckled. "Ah, the human way. Hesitation and endless words." Jason gritted his teeth. "No, the human way is making sure we punish the right person." Ciela tilted her head, considering his words. You have a point. If we act too quickly, the real enemy may stay hidden. The Emperor sighed. Very well. We will investigate first. But when we find the traitor, they will not be shown mercy. Jason nodded. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. A private conversation. Later that night, Sayala found Jason on the palace balcony, staring at the city below. You handled my father well, she said, stepping beside him. Jason chuckled. That's one way to put it. She looked at him, her expression softer than usual. You could have refused this marriage. You still can. Yet you stay. Why? Jason sighed. Because if I leave, there's a chance our people go to war. And despite everything, I'd rather be here than watch thousands die. Sayala studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she smiled. Perhaps you are not as weak as I thought, human. Jason smirked. Gee, thanks. But deep inside, he knew things were only going to get more dangerous. Jason Carter had been in dangerous situations before, but being engaged to an alien princess while surrounded by possible traitors was a whole new level of stress. The palace was on high alert after the assassination attempt. Guards patrolled the halls, and the nobles whispered among themselves. Jason knew one thing for sure. Whoever wanted him dead wouldn't stop now. Sayala had taken charge of the investigation, interrogating suspects and reviewing palace security. Jason, on the other hand, had decided to do things the human way, by asking questions, a suspicious conversation. Late that night, Jason walked through the palace corridors, pretending to be lost. In reality, he was eavesdropping. He had learned long ago that the best way to find the truth was to listen when people didn't know they were being heard. Near the eastern wing, he heard hushed voices. You should have finished him when you had the chance, someone whispered. Jason's heart pounded. He pressed himself against the wall, staying out of sight. A second voice spoke, calmer but full of authority. It is not that simple. If he dies now, the alliance becomes stronger. We must be careful. Jason recognized that voice. Lord Varrock. His mind raced. Lord Varrock was one of the Emperor's closest advisors. If he was behind the attack, then this conspiracy ran deeper than he had thought. Jason peeked around the corner. He saw two figures in the shadows, Lord Varrock and a hooded figure. Before he could get closer, the hooded figure noticed him. Intruder. Jason barely had time to react before they attacked. He dodged, rolling to the side as a knife missed him by inches. Guards, he shouted, hoping someone would hear. Footsteps echoed in the halls. Sayala and her warriors arrived just in time. The hooded figure tried to flee, but Sayala moved like lightning, cutting them down in a single strike. Lord Varrock, however, remained calm. This is a misunderstanding, he said smoothly. The human is mistaken. Jason stepped forward, breathing hard. Oh, really? Because I just heard you plotting my death. Sayala's silver eyes narrowed. Explain yourself, Varrock. Varrock smirked. If you accuse me, princess, you accuse the entire High Council. Are you willing to start a civil war? Sayala hesitated. Jason could see the conflict in her eyes. If they moved against Varrock without proof, it could destabilize the kingdom. Jason exhaled sharply. We need evidence. Varrock chuckled. Then I suggest you find it quickly, before another assassin finishes the job. With that, he walked away, untouched. Jason clenched his fists. The enemy was right in front of them, but they couldn't strike. Not yet. Sayala turned to Jason, her expression dark. We have to be careful. Jason nodded. Yeah, because next time, they won't miss. Jason Carter sat in Sayala's private chamber, his mind racing. They now knew Lord Varrock was behind the assassination attempt, but they had no proof. And without proof, they couldn't act against him without starting a civil war. Sayala paced the room, her arms crossed. Varrock is careful. He will not make mistakes easily. Jason sighed. Then we have to force him to make one. She stopped and looked at him. What do you mean? Jason leaned forward. We set a trap. We make Varrock believe I have something important, something that could expose him. If he takes the bait, we'll catch him in the act. Sayala considered it. It's risky. If he realizes it's a trick, he will try to kill you again. Jason smirked. He's already trying to kill me. At least this way, we control the situation. She let out a deep breath, then nodded. Very well. What do you suggest? The bait is set. The next day, Jason accidentally let it slip that he had obtained secret documents that contained evidence of a conspiracy against the Emperor. He made sure the rumor spread through the palace. By nightfall, Sayala and Jason waited in a hidden chamber, watching through a security feed as a hooded figure sneaked into Jason's room. Jason grinned. Told you he'd take the bait. The hooded figure moved straight to Jason's desk and began searching through the drawers. When they found a small data chip Jason had planted, they quickly grabbed it and turned to leave. Sayala pressed a button, and the doors slammed shut. Guards stormed into the room, surrounding the intruder. Jason and Sayala arrived seconds later, stepping forward as the guards pulled off the intruder's hood. It wasn't Varrock. It was one of his closest allies, Commander Relic, head of palace security. Jason's stomach dropped. The man responsible for protecting the Emperor was working with the enemy. Sayala's expression turned to stone. You betray the throne. Relic sneered. You are the traitor, princess, aligning us with weak humans. Valari do not bow to lesser species. Jason clenched his fists. You mean Varrock doesn't want to share power? Relic laughed. You think this is about power? No. This is about keeping our people strong. The Emperor is blind. But soon, a new leader will rise. Sayala stepped forward, her blade at Relic's throat. Who else is involved? Relic smirked. Kill me if you wish, but you are already too late. Before anyone could react, he bit down on something. Within seconds, he collapsed, poisoned. Jason swore under his breath. They had caught a traitor, but their real enemy, Varrock, was still free. Sayala turned to Jason, her silver eyes blazing. We have to act now. Jason nodded grimly. Then let's finish this. The palace was no longer safe. After the death of Commander Relic, Jason and Sayala knew they had little time before Varrock made his next move. We need to go to my father, Sayala said as she strapped on her armor. He must know the truth. Jason agreed, but something in his gut told him it wouldn't be that simple. An unexpected attack. As they made their way to the Emperor's chamber, the palace suddenly shook with a loud explosion. Jason's heart pounded. What the hell was that? Sayala's face hardened. Varrock. He's making his move. Guards ran through the halls as the sound of battle filled the air. The palace was under attack from the inside. Loyalists to Varrock had revealed themselves, fighting against the Emperor's forces. We need to move, Sayala shouted, grabbing Jason's arm. They rushed toward the throne room, cutting through the chaos. Jason wasn't a warrior, but he grabbed a fallen guard's energy pistol and did his best to keep up. When they reached the throne room, they stopped in horror. The Emperor was on the ground, bleeding, as Varrock stood over him with a bloody blade. You're too late, Varrock sneered. The Emperor is dying. Soon, the throne will be mine. Sayala's whole body tensed with rage. You will never rule, traitor. Varrock laughed. Who will stop me? You? He glanced at Jason. Or the weak human. Jason gritted his teeth. You talk too much. Then he fired. The energy blast hit Varrock's shoulder, making him stumble back. Sayala charged, her blade clashing with his in a deadly duel. Jason ran to the Emperor's side. The old ruler was still breathing, but barely. Stay with me, Your Majesty, Jason urged. The Emperor coughed. My daughter must win. Jason looked up just in time to see Sayala disarm Varrock, sending his blade clattering to the floor. She pressed her sword to his throat. "Kill me, then," Varrock spat. Sayala hesitated. Jason stepped forward. "No. He needs to answer for his crimes." Varrock smirked. "If you spare me, my followers will come for you. This is not over." Sayala clenched her jaw, then turned to her father. "What is your command?" The Emperor, weak but determined, whispered, "Justice, not revenge." Sayala nodded and motioned for the guards. "Take him away." Varrock snarled, but was dragged out by loyal warriors. Jason let out a breath of relief. "We won." Sayala looked at her injured father, then at Jason. "Not yet." Because this war wasn't just about Varrock. It was about the future of their people. And Jason wasn't sure if they had truly secured peace or only delayed the next battle. The throne room was in chaos. The Emperor was wounded, Varrock had been captured, and the palace was still under lockdown. Jason Carter stood beside Princess Sayala, his pulse still racing from the fight. The guards secured the area, dragging away Varrock's remaining followers. The rebellion had been crushed, but Jason knew this wasn't over. Sayala knelt beside her father. His breathing was weak, his golden blood staining the floor. She gently took his hand. "Father, stay with me." The Emperor gave her a tired smile. "You have done well, my daughter." Jason watched as a team of royal medics rushed in to treat the Emperor. He wasn't sure how severe the wounds were, but one thing was clear. Sayala would have to take command. She stood up, her face hard with determination. "I will not allow more bloodshed." Jason nodded. "Then we need to secure the palace and make sure Varrock's men don't try anything else." Sayala turned to her most trusted warriors. "Lock down the city. Any traitors still hiding must be found." A last attempt. As the guards left to carry out her orders, Jason noticed something strange. A figure lurking in the shadows near the exit. His instincts screamed danger. "Sayala, look out!" Jason shouted. A hidden assassin lunged forward, a poison dagger in hand. Jason reacted without thinking. He tackled Sayala out of the way. The blade slashed past them, barely missing. Sayala rolled to her feet, drawing her sword in one swift motion. Before the assassin could strike again, she drove her blade through his chest. The assassin gasped, then collapsed. Dead. Jason caught his breath. That was close. Sayala looked at the fallen assassin, then at Jason. "You saved my life." Jason chuckled, still shaken. "Guess that makes us even." She stared at him for a moment. Then, to his surprise, placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, it means I trust you, Jason Carter." Jason felt something shift between them. She wasn't just tolerating him anymore. She saw him as an equal. A new beginning. Minutes later, news spread. The Emperor would survive. The rebellion was over, and the palace was secure. As Jason and Sayala stood on the palace balcony, overlooking the city, he exhaled deeply. "So, what happens now?" Sayala looked at him with a small, unreadable smile. "We still have an alliance to honor. My people expect a royal wedding." Jason blinked. "Wait, you're saying?" She smirked. "Yes, human. The engagement is still on." Jason groaned. "Of course it is." But as he looked at Sayala, something inside him told him that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the worst thing that could happen. The palace was alive with celebration. Bright banners waved in the air, alien melodies filled the halls, and the grand city of the Valeri Empire shone like a jewel under the twin moons. Jason Carter stood in his ceremonial outfit, adjusting the collar nervously. He still couldn't believe it. He was about to marry an alien princess. "Relax, human," a voice said behind him. Jason turned to see Sayala standing there, dressed in elegant royal armor with flowing silver fabric. She looked both regal and dangerous. Jason sighed. "I'm trying, but this is a lot to take in." Sayala smirked. "You've faced assassins and war. Yet a wedding scares you. Jason chuckled. Well, marrying a warrior princess in front of thousands of aliens is a little intimidating. She stepped closer, her silver eyes watching him carefully. This alliance will bring peace to both our worlds. But tell me, Jason, are you truly ready? Jason met her gaze. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I'd rather face it with you than without you. Ciela tilted her head, as if analyzing his words. Then, for the first time, she smiled. Good answer, human. The ceremony begins. The great hall was filled with nobles, warriors, and diplomats from both Earth and the Valari Empire. The emperor, now recovered, sat on his throne, watching with approval. Jason and Ciela stood before the sacred altar. A high priest raised his hands. Let this union forge a new destiny. May the strength of the Valari and the spirit of humanity walk together as one. Jason took a deep breath as Ciela extended her hand. He placed his hand in hers, feeling the warmth of her skin. Do you, Jason Carter, accept this bond, to honor and fight for this alliance? Jason looked at Ciela, then smiled. I do. And do you, Princess Ciela, accept this bond, to stand beside him and lead with strength? Ciela held his gaze and nodded. I do. The crowd erupted in cheers as the priest declared them bonded. A new journey begins. As the celebrations continued, Jason stood on the balcony, looking at the vast alien city. So much had changed since he first arrived. He had come as an outsider, but now, he was part of something greater. Ciela joined him, standing close. You did well, Jason. He chuckled. So does this mean I finally earned your respect? She smirked. Perhaps. Jason smiled. Well, if I'm going to be your husband, I think we should at least try to be friends. Ciela thought for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. But be warned, friendship with me is not easy. Jason grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. And so, a new chapter began, for Jason, for Ciela, and for both their worlds.